So we've been talking a lot about coagulation, but I want to talk about anticoagulation now. So how do we prevent too much clots? Because you want a nice balance. You want a nice balance between your coagulation. What was the main meter of coagulation? Or you need the clotting factors. So you want a nice balance between these and anticoagulating factors. So the first ones that we want to talk about are protein C and S, which we actually talked about before. So protein C and S, they work by inactivating clotting factors 5 and 8. Okay, so the next ones that also have anticoagulatory effects are antithrombin. So it inhibits many activated clotting factors. And the key ones it inhibits are thrombin, which would be factor 2, as well as factor 10A. So antithrombin inhibits thrombin, but also inhibits factor 10A. And finally, the other one that has anticoagulatory function is plasmin. Plasmin leads to fibrinolysis. And plasmin is activated by TPA. It's a medication we use a lot, but it's tissue plasminogen activator. So TPA activates plasminogen and turns it into plasmin. Plasmin breaks down. Remember, we have a fibrin. In our clotting cascade, we have a platelet plug and turns into a thrombus thanks to this fibrin cross-linking. And plasmin breaks down this fibrin. Fibrinolysis breaks down of the thrombus, it gets weaker, and you get anticoagulation. So, protein C, how does that work? It activates factors 5 and 8. Antithrombin, how does it work? It activates factors 2 and 10A. And then finally, plasmin leads to fibrinolysis. And these are how all of these help prevent too much clotting. So we're going to talk about what happens when we have problems with this and a couple other things. And obviously, then you would have too much clotting, you get a hypercoagulable state. So the first one is factor V Leiden. So this is a problem where you have a factor V that protein C and S can't cleave. And this is the most common inherited cause of hypercoagulable state. Remember, protein C and S, what do they normally cleave? They normally cleave factor V, factor 8. Next one is antithrombin deficiency. So if you have a deficiency in antithrombin, what's going to happen? What does antithrombin normally do? Remember, antithrombin normally inhibits the function of factors 2 and 10. So if you have deficiency in this, you can get overactivity of those factors, and you're going to get clotting. Overactivities of clotting factors lead to clotting. So the way you can get this is you can have it inherited or acquired. So acquired would be, do you remember what renal disease we talked about that can get antithrombin deficiency? Remember, it was nephrotic syndrome where you're peeing out too much antithrombin protein that leads to that deficiency. Now you're going to see a diminished rise in PTT after heparin administration. What would you normally see for PTT if you give heparin? What would you normally see? Well, PTT normally should increase with heparin. There should be increased the bleeding time should increase, or the time that the patient bleeds, because heparin is anticoagulatory. But in a patient with antithrombin deficiency, it's going to be diminished. Their PTT is not going to rise as much. And why is that? Remember, I told you that heparin works by enhancing antithrombin activity. If you have a deficiency in antithrombin, your heparin doesn't really work very well, and so your PTT will not rise. Okay. Next is protein C or protein S deficiency. Again, what factors would be overactive in this case? Remember, factors 5 and 8, because you have less inactivation of these factors. The other thing is these patients are at increased risk of warfarin skin necrosis. I've already talked about that already. Do you remember what it was? Remember that warfarin prevents activation of a bunch of clotting factors as well as protein C and S in the liver. So active forms. Warfarin blocks this through reducing less reduced vitamin K. So what happens is you still when this happens though, you still have some clotting factors that are still active. And these have some half-life, but right when you give warfarin, or in the short time after that, you have too much of these active clotting factors. And the other thing is that these guys have a shorter half-life, so these guys disappear first. And it's even worse because you have a deficiency. Now you have too much clotting factors, so you have too much, remember that we have that seesaw, it's too much clotting factors, so you get overcoagulation. You get coagulation in the skin, you get coagulation in the small vessels, you get necrosis. That's warfarin skin necrosis. Finally, prothrombin gene mutation leads to too much production of prothrombin. Prothrombin, obviously, it's that's factor 2. So too much factor 2 leads to overcoagulation, hypercoagulable state. So these are hereditary causes of hypercoagulable state. Now there's some non-hereditary causes. The first one is heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, aka HIT. What happens is you get antibody formation against the complex of heparin and platelet factor 4. So you get a complex that you already have a complex of heparin and platelet factor 4, and then you're gonna for some reason you get antibodies against this complex. And this antibody complex is gonna go activate platelets. You're gonna get too much activation of platelets. You're gonna get thrombosis. You're gonna get overactivation leads to thrombocytopenia due to consumption. You consume all these platelets. And the other thing you're going to get is you're going to get macrophages in the reticuloendothelial system. So that's the liver, spleen, and bone marrow. You get macrophages here, and so they're going to go eat up this abnormal antibody heparin platelet complex. So they're going to eat up all these platelet-coated complexes, and so you're going to get decreased platelets there as well. So that's heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. Again, you normally have this heparin platelet factor 4 complex, and then you get these antibodies against it, and then this whole complex here activates platelets. You get consumption, you get thrombosis, you get decreased platelets, so it's hypercoagulable. The other one is OCP use, so oral contraceptive use. Oral contraceptives, what hormones do they contain? They contain a lot of estrogen, and they can also contain progesterone. And estrogen stimulates productions of coagulation factors. So too much coagulation factors, too much coagulation. Finally, cancer is a hypercoagulable state because the tumor cells can activate the coagulation system. So heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, oral contraceptive use, cancer are all non-hereditary causes of hypercoagulable states. And what are the clinical features of this? It's very simple. You're going to get, patients are at risk of thrombosis and thromboembolism, so that's when the thrombus dislodges and shoots all over the body. And you can get this in all parts of the body. So what diseases with pathophysiologies with this can you think of? It's pretty much anything. Like, so many things have this. So heart attacks have this, DVTs have this, strokes have this, pulmonary embolisms have this, and more. So this can be a problem. And if you see patients with recurring DVTs, recurring pulmonary embolism, strokes, you want to be thinking about these hypercoagulable states. So that's it for our hypercoagulable states and anticoagulation.